I caught my wife with my daughter's fiancé 3 days before their wedding. When I tried to warn my daughter, my son stopped me and whispered, "Dad, I have been helping you gather proof, but there is a secret about Mom you need to know." I was completely shocked. I am Gerald, 70 years old, a retired architect who built skyscrapers that define the Chicago skyline. I thought I knew how to spot a crack in a foundation, but I missed the one that was about to bring my entire life down. 3 days ago, I walked toward my pool house to retrieve my heart medication, and what I saw through the glass shattered my world. Inside, my wife Patricia was pressed against the billiards table, her fingers tangled in the hair of Tyler, the man who was supposed to marry my daughter Sarah this Saturday. I froze. My chest tightened, not from my condition, but from the sheer toxicity of the scene. Tyler laughed, a cold, mocking sound that drifted through the open window. "Do not worry about the old man," he said, smoothing his shirt. "His heart is ticking like a time bomb. Just 3 more days, babe. Once Sarah signs that trust fund over to our joint account, he can drop dead for all I care." Patricia giggled, a sound I used to think was charming, but now sounded like a snake hissing. "Just make sure you perform well on the honeymoon," she replied. "I need my cut of that 10 million, Tyler. I have been playing the devoted nurse to that wrinkly bag of bones for 5 years. I earned every penny." Before I continue this story of betrayal and ultimate justice, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect a loved one from a snake in the grass. The pain in my left arm was sudden and sharp, radiating up to my jaw. I dropped the bottle of water I was holding onto the manicured grass. It made a soft thud, drowned out by the blood rushing in my ears. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burst through those sliding glass doors and strangle them both with my bare hands. I took a step forward, my vision blurring with rage. I was going to kill him. I did not care about the consequences. I did not care about the law. I was going to end this charade right now. But before I could touch the handle, a hand clamped over my mouth. It was strong, calloused, and unyielding. Another arm wrapped around my waist, dragging me backward with the efficiency of a soldier. I struggled, kicking out, trying to bite the hand that was silencing me. I thought Tyler had a lookout. I thought I was about to be murdered right there in my own garden. "Quiet," a voice hissed in my ear. It was low, rough, but familiar. "Do not make a sound, old man, unless you want them to win." The grip loosened only when we were behind the thick oak doors of the detached garage, surrounded by my collection of vintage cars. I spun around, gasping for air, my hand clutching my chest. Standing there, leaning against the hood of my 1967 Shelby Mustang, was Brandon, my son. The son I had not spoken to in 3 years, because Patricia had convinced me he was ungrateful and dangerous. Brandon looked different. He was no longer the scrawny boy who played video games. He was broader, his face lined with a hardness that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult choices. He wore a dark leather jacket and held a finger to his lips. "You," I wheezed, leaning against the car for support. "What are you doing here? Did you see them? Did you see what those animals were doing?" "Let me go, Brandon. I have to tell Sarah. I have to call the police." Brandon shook his head, his expression unreadable. "You go out there now, and you lose everything. You think the police care about adultery. You think Sarah will believe you. Patricia has spent 5 years painting you as a senile, paranoid old man. She has already told the family doctor you are having hallucinations. If you run out there screaming, they will just call an ambulance and have you committed. And while you are sedated in a facility, Tyler will marry Sarah, and they will drain the accounts before you wake up." I stared at him, the horrible logic of his words sinking in. My legs gave out, and I slid down to the cold concrete floor. The smell of motor oil and old leather surrounded me, grounding me in reality. "So what do I do?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "Do I just let him marry her? Do I let that vulture pick my bones clean?" Brandon walked over to a workbench and picked up a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto my lap. It felt heavy, heavier than it looked. "I did not come back for the free champagne, Dad," Brandon said, his voice devoid of warmth but full of resolve. "I came back because I have been tracking them. You thought Tyler was just a personal trainer Sarah met at the gym. Opened the file." My hands trembled as I undid the clasp. Inside were photographs, bank statements, and copies of legal documents. The first photo showed Tyler, but he looked younger, his hair longer. He was standing on a beach in Miami, his arm around a woman. I squinted. The woman was Patricia. I checked the date stamp on the back of the photo. It was dated 7 years ago, 2 years before I even met Patricia. They know each other. I asked, my stomach churning. Brandon nodded. "They are not just lovers, Dad. Tyler is her nephew, or at least that is what they told the authorities in Florida when they ran a real estate scam down there in 2018. They target widowers and wealthy single women. Patricia is the bait, and Tyler is the closer. They bleed the mark dry and move on." I flipped through the pages. There were mugshots. Tyler had been arrested for fraud, but the charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. Patricia had a different last name back then. Why, I asked, tears stinging my eyes. "Why did you not tell me sooner?" "I tried," Brandon said, his voice rising slightly. "Remember 3 years ago when I told you something was off about her? You threw me out. You said I was jealous of your happiness. You said Patricia was the best thing that ever happened to you." The memory hit me harder than the heart pain. I had been so lonely after Sarah's mother died. Patricia had been my nurse, so attentive, so kind. She had listened to my stories, cooked my favorite meals, and made me feel young again. When Brandon had voiced his suspicions, I had defended her with the ferocity of a blind man protecting his guide dog. I had chosen a con artist over my own flesh and blood. "I am sorry," I choked out, looking up at my son. I was a fool, a lonely, stupid old fool. "We do not have time for apologies." Brandon cut me off, though his eyes softened just a fraction. "We have 3 days. The wedding is on Saturday. If they say I do, Tyler gets access to Sarah's trust fund. That is $10 million, Dad. Plus, once they are married, anything happens to Sarah. Well, let's just say accidents happen." A chill ran down my spine. "You think they would hurt her?" "I think people who wait 5 years for a payday do not like loose ends," Brandon replied grimly. "But we have a problem. This file. It is circumstantial. We know they know each other, but we cannot prove they are plotting to steal the money or harm you. If we show this to Sarah now, Patricia will spin it. She will say Tyler is a distant relative she was trying to help, that she was ashamed to tell you. She is good, Dad. You know how good she is. She will cry, she will faint, and Sarah will take her side because Sarah is terrified of losing a mother figure again." I gripped the file until my knuckles turned white. I felt a transformation taking place inside me. The grief and shock were evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was a builder. I solved problems. I dealt with structural failures. And this was the biggest structural failure of my life. "What is the plan?" I asked, standing up. I felt steady now. The weakness was gone. Brandon smirked, a dangerous expression that reminded me of myself 40 years ago. "We need a confession. We need them to say it on tape. And we need to catch them when they feel safest. But for that to happen, you have to go back in there. You have to walk into that house, eat dinner with them, and smile at the woman who wants you dead. Can you do that?" I straightened my jacket. I thought about the way Patricia had looked at me this morning, asking if I had taken my pills, her eyes scanning me for signs of weakness. I thought about Sarah, my beautiful, naive daughter, who was currently upstairs writing her vows to a monster. "I will not just smile," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "I will play the part of the dying old man so well they will want to give me an Oscar. I will give them exactly what they want right until the moment we take everything from them." Brandon reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black device, a button camera. "Put this on your vest," he said, "and take these." He handed me a different bottle of pills. "She has been switching your heart medication with high-dose anxiety blockers and mild hallucinogens. That is why you have been feeling foggy. That is why your hands shake. It is not age, Dad. It is poison." I took the bottle, staring at the small white tablets. My wife was poisoning me. The woman I slept next to every night. The realization should have broken me, but instead, it forged me into steel. I pinned the camera to my vest, hiding it beneath the fold of the fabric. I took the antidote Brandon offered and swallowed it dry. "I am ready," I said. "Then let's go catch some rats," Brandon said. I walked out of the garage and back into the sunlight. The garden looked the same, but I was different. The birds were singing. The marquee for the wedding was being set up by workers in white uniforms, and the smell of expensive lilies filled the air. It was a perfect setting for a tragedy, but I was about to rewrite the script. I walked into the main house. The air conditioning hit me, cooling the sweat on my brow. I heard footsteps coming from the hallway. Patricia emerged looking fresh, her hair perfectly coiffed, wearing a floral dress that cost more than most people's cars. She smiled when she saw me, that dazzling, practiced smile that had fooled me for half a decade. "Gerald, darling," she exclaimed, walking over to brush imaginary lint off my shoulder. "I was looking for you. Did you find your water? You look a little pale. Are you feeling all right?" I looked into her eyes. They were blue like the ocean, and just as deep, just as hiding of predators beneath the surface. I forced my hands to tremble slightly. I let my shoulders slump. I made my voice quiver. I am fine, dear," I stammered, leaning on her arm heavily. "Just a little dizzy. The heat, you know. It gets to me these days." Patricia's eyes flashed with a hint of triumph, gone in an instant. "Oh, you poor thing. Come sit down. Tyler is just freshening up. We can have an early dinner. Sarah is so excited to show you the seating chart." She led me into the dining room. I sat at the head of the table, the seat of power I had occupied for 30 years. But today I felt like a spy in enemy territory. Tyler walked in a moment later. He was wearing a polo shirt that showed off his muscles, the muscles he used to seduce my wife and charm my daughter. "Hey, Pops," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. A little too hard. Still kicking, I looked at his hand, then up at his face. I saw the arrogance there, the certainty that he had already won. He looked at me and saw a checkbook with a pulse. "Still kicking, Tyler," I said, allowing a senile smile to spread across my face. "Just waiting for the big day. It is going to be a day none of us will ever forget." He winked at Patricia. "You can say that again, Pops." Sarah came bounding down the stairs, holding a large diagram. "Daddy, look. We put the governor next to Aunt Mildred. Do you think that is okay?" My heart broke all over again looking at her. She was glowing. She was so happy. She had no idea that the two people she loved most in the world, besides me, were plotting to destroy her. I wanted to grab her, shake her, tell her to run. But I could feel the weight of the button camera on my chest. I could feel Brandon's presence out there in the dark, watching recording. "It looks perfect, sweetheart," I said softly. Dinner was a torture I would not wish on my worst enemy. I watched them eat my food, drink my wine, and lie to my face. Patricia cut my meat for me, treating me like an invalid. "You know, Gerald," she said, pausing with a forkful of steak, "Tyler and Sarah were thinking about the house. Since you are finding the stairs so difficult lately, maybe it is time we discussed that assisted living facility in Florida." The one with the golf course. The room went quiet. Sarah looked down at her plate, uncomfortable. "Mom, not now," Sarah murmured. No, Tyler interrupted, leaning forward. "Your mom is right, Sarah. We just want what is best for Gerald. He needs professional care. And this house, It is too big for one person. If we sell it, we can put the money into the trust, secure our future. I gripped my napkin under the table. They were not even waiting until the wedding. They were accelerating the timeline. I will think about it, I mumbled, dropping my fork. It clattered loudly on the china. Oh, clumsy me. Patricia sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. It is okay, darling. We can handle the paperwork. You just need to rest. Actually, Tyler and I were hoping you could sign the check for the caterers tonight. It is $50,000. They need it before Saturday. She pulled a checkbook out of her purse. My checkbook. She placed it in front of me along with a pen. Tyler watched me like a hawk. This was it. The test. I picked up the pen. My hand shook violently. I looked at the check. I looked at Patricia. I realized that if I signed this, I was funding my own destruction. But if I refused, they might panic. They might do something drastic tonight. I lowered the pen to the paper. The ink started to bleed into the paper as I held it there, hesitating. Dad, Sarah asked, "Are you okay?" I looked up at my daughter. I saw the concern in her eyes. She was still in there, buried under their manipulation. I am just overwhelmed, I said. I dropped the pen. It rolled off the table. Patricia's jaw tightened. Just sign it, Gerald. It takes 2 seconds. I cannot, I whispered. My hand, it hurts. Tomorrow, I will sign it tomorrow morning, I promise. Tyler's eyes narrowed. He looked at Patricia. A silent communication passed between them. Anger. Frustration. But then calculation. Okay, Patricia said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, but her eyes cold as ice. Tomorrow morning. First thing. But Gerald, you really must take your medicine now. You look terrible. She poured a glass of water and handed me 2 blue pills. The poison. I took them. I put them in my mouth. I pretended to swallow, hiding them under my tongue. Good boy, she said, patting my cheek. As I sat there, surrounded by the monsters in my own home, I realized that the man I used to be, the architect, the builder, was gone. In his place was something else. Something dangerous. They thought they were burying me. They did not know they were planting a seed. And come Saturday, they were going to reap a harvest of hell. Later that night, I lay in bed listening to the rhythm of Patricia's breathing next to me. I waited until she was deeply asleep. Then I slowly, silently slid out of bed. I crept to the bathroom and spat the pills into the toilet. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked old. I looked tired. But my eyes were clear. I pulled a burner phone from my robe pocket, one Brandon had slipped me in the garage. I typed a single text message. They took the bait. I am in. What is the next step? The reply came 3 seconds later. Check under the loose floorboard in the library. I left something for you. It is time to turn the tables. I crept downstairs, the house silent as a tomb. The library was my sanctuary, the place where I had designed my greatest works. I knelt by the bookshelf in the corner, prying up the loose board I had meant to fix for years. Inside was a tablet and a small earpiece. I put the earpiece in. Brandon's voice came through crystal clear. Good evening, Dad. Are you ready to see what they do when they think you are asleep? I looked at the tablet screen. It showed a live feed from the living room downstairs. Tyler was there. Tyler was, and he was not alone. He was on the phone, pacing back and forth. Yeah, the old fool bought it, Tyler was saying into the phone. But we have a problem. He didn't sign the check. No, I don't think he suspects anything. He's just losing his mind. But listen, plans have changed. We can't wait for the heart attack. If he doesn't sign tomorrow, we might have to help him down the stairs. I froze. A cold sweat broke out on my neck. Brandon's voice in my ear was tight. You heard him. They are escalating. We need to move fast. Look at the other file on the tablet. The one labeled Nevada. I tapped the screen. A document opened. It was a marriage certificate, dated 20 years ago. Las Vegas, Nevada. Groom Silvio Dante. Bride Patricia Ann Miller. I scrolled down. There was no divorce decree, no death certificate for Silvio Dante. My breath caught in my throat. She is still married, Brandon said. Which means her marriage to you is void. She is a bigamist dad, and that means she has no claim to your assets. But Tyler is marrying Sarah. That is still legal. We can nail Patricia, but Tyler could still walk away with half of Sarah's future. Unless what? I whispered into the darkness of the library. Unless we find Silvio, Brandon said. And I think I know where he is. But I need you to hold the fort. I need you to survive one more day in that house without getting pushed down the stairs. Can you do that? I looked at the screen at Tyler pacing like a caged animal. I looked at the marriage certificate that proved my entire marriage was a lie. I will survive, I said. And when you bring Silvio here, I want a front row seat when the world comes crashing down on them. Suddenly on the screen, Tyler stopped pacing. He looked up at the ceiling, directly at the spot where I was kneeling in the library above him. Did you hear that? Tyler asked the empty room. He hung up the phone. He started walking toward the stairs. Brandon swore in my ear. He heard you. Get out of there, Dad. Get back to bed. Now I scrambled to my feet, shoving the tablet back under the floorboard. My heart was pounding for real this time. I heard the creak of the stairs. Tyler was coming up. He was coming to check on me. I moved as fast as my 70-year-old legs could carry me. I slipped into the bedroom, diving under the covers just as the door handle turned. I squeezed my eyes shut, regulating my breathing, praying my racing heart wouldn't be visible through the duvet. The door creaked open. A beam of light from the hallway cut across the bed. I felt a presence standing over me. I smelled his cologne, too strong, too musky. I felt a hand reach out. It hovered over my face. For a terrifying second, I thought he was going to smother me with the pillow right then and there. Patricia shifted in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. The hand withdrew. "Sleep tight, old man," Tyler whispered. The door closed. I opened my eyes in the darkness. I had survived the night. But tomorrow, the real war would begin. And I had a secret weapon they never saw coming. The dining room of our estate in Connecticut had always been a place of warmth and laughter. It was where I taught Sarah how to cut a steak properly, where we celebrated Brandon's acceptance into college, and where I toasted to my late wife's memory every Christmas. But tonight, the mahogany table felt like a cold slab in a morgue. The crystal chandelier above us did not sparkle. It glared, casting harsh shadows on the faces of the three people sitting with me. I sat at the head of the table, my hands resting on the white linen tablecloth. To my right sat Sarah, my beautiful daughter, glowing with the radiance that only a bride-to-be possesses. To my left was Patricia, the woman I had married, thinking she was my salvation, who I now knew was my executioner. And next to her sat Tyler, the man who was about to steal my daughter's future. The air was thick with the smell of roast beef and expensive red wine, but all I could smell was the metallic tang of betrayal. I had to remind myself to breathe. I had to remind myself that the button camera hidden in my vest was recording every word, every glance, every lie. I took a sip of water, my hand trembling slightly. This was not acting. The adrenaline coursing through my 70-year-old veins was enough to make anyone shake. I watched Tyler cut into his meat with aggressive precision. He ate like a wolf that had not fed in weeks. "So Gerald," Tyler said, chewing with his mouth slightly open, a habit I had overlooked before but now found repulsive. "Sarah tells me you built this house yourself back in the 80s. It is quite a property. The land value alone must have tripled since then." I slowly turned my head to look at him. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was not admiring the architecture. He was appraising an asset. He was already mentally selling it, counting the cash he would split with Patricia once I was out of the picture. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice low and raspy, playing the part of the tired old man. "I designed every corner. The foundation is reinforced steel. It was built to last. It was built to withstand storms." Patricia reached out and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was soft, her manicure perfect, but her touch felt like ice. "Oh, Gerald is so sentimental about this place," she said, offering a tight smile to the table. "But we have to be realistic, don't we, darling? It is too much for you to manage now. The stairs, the maintenance, it is a burden." I pulled my hand away, slowly pretending to reach for my wine glass. "It is my home, Patricia," I muttered. Sarah chimed in, her voice full of innocent excitement. "Daddy, don't be grumpy. Patricia just wants you to be comfortable. Besides, wait until you hear our news. Show him Tyler." I looked at Sarah. Her eyes were sparkling. She had no idea. She was a lamb happily trotting toward the slaughterhouse, and she wanted me to be happy for her. It broke my heart. I wanted to scream the truth to overturn the table and throw them out. But Brandon's voice echoed in my memory. "Wait for the proof. Wait for the check." Tyler wiped his mouth with a napkin and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a glossy brochure and slid it across the table toward me. It was a listing for a luxury villa in Lake Tahoe. "We found it," Sarah squealed, clapping her hands. "It is the perfect investment property, Dad. Tyler says the market there is exploding. We want to buy it as our first home together. We can rent it out during the ski season and use it for summers. Isn't it beautiful?" I stared at the photo of the house. It was a generic modern glass box, soulless, expensive. "It is very modern," I said. Tyler leaned forward, his elbows on the table, invading my personal space. "The seller is highly motivated, Gerald, but we need to move fast. There are 3 other offers on the table. If we do not put down a deposit by tomorrow morning, we lose it." Here it comes, I thought. The trap. Patricia signaled to the maid to refill our glasses. She waited until the servant had left the room before she spoke. Her voice dropped to that serious, business-like tone she used when she was manipulating me. "Gerald, we discussed this with our financial advisor." She lied smoothly. "Since Sarah's trust fund does not unlock until the marriage is official on Saturday, we are in a bit of a bind for the deposit. We do not want them to miss this opportunity. It is a once-in-a-lifetime deal." I looked from Patricia to Tyler. They were working in perfect sync, a tag team of grifters. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Tyler cleared his throat. $500,000. Just for the down payment. We will pay you back the second the trust fund opens up on Monday. It is just a bridge loan, Pops. Family helping family. $500,000. $500,000. They were not just stealing. They were looting. They wanted to drain my liquid assets before they killed me, ensuring there was nothing left for Brandon or the lawyers to fight over. I looked at Sarah. She was biting her lip, looking hopeful. "Daddy, please. It would mean so much to us. It is our dream house. They were using her. They were weaponizing my love for my daughter against me. If I refused, I was the bitter, stingy father ruining her happiness. If I agreed, I was funding my own destruction. I don't know," I stammered, letting my head drop slightly. "That is a lot of money to move so quickly." "The bank." Patricia reached into her purse. She pulled out my checkbook. She had taken it from my desk. The audacity was breathtaking. "I already called the bank manager, Gerald," she said, uncapping a fountain pen. "He is expecting the transaction. All you have to do is sign. I filled out the rest to save you the trouble." She slid the checkbook in front of me. The check was already written. "Pay to the order of Tyler J. Miller. $500,000. The pen was thrust into my hand. The plastic felt cold against my skin. "Sign it, Gerald," Patricia said. Her voice was soft, but the command underneath was hard as granite. "Do it for Sarah. Do it so you can rest easy, knowing she is taken care of." I looked at the check. The numbers swam before my eyes. I felt the weight of the room pressing down on me. Tyler was watching my hand. Patricia was watching my face. Sarah was watching the brochure. I tightened my grip on the pen. I knew what I had to do. I had to buy time. I had to stall without making them suspicious. I had to play the role of the invalid to perfection. I brought the pen tip down to the paper. I let it hover over the signature line. "That's it," Tyler whispered, greed leaking out of his voice. "Just right there." I started to write the letter G. But then I unleashed the tremor. I let my hand spasm violently, jerking to the right. The pen slashed across the paper, ruining the check, but I did not stop there. I allowed the momentum of the spasm to carry my arm outward, hitting the crystal wine goblet sitting next to the checkbook. The glass tipped. Time seemed to slow down. The dark red Cabernet Sauvignon cascaded out of the glass like a wave of blood. It splashed across the white tablecloth, soaked the ruined check, and splashed heavily onto Patricia's lap. Patricia screamed. It was not a scream of surprise. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. She jumped up her chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "You clumsy old fool!" she shrieked, batting at the red stains spreading across her white silk dress. "Look what you did! This is Italian silk!" The mask had slipped. For 3 seconds, the loving wife was gone. In her place was a harpy with teeth bared. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I saw it. I saw the murder in them. I saw the hatred she had been hiding for 5 years. It was a cold, dead stare that promised retribution. Tyler stood up, his face twisted in annoyance. "Jesus, Gerald, can't you control your own damn hands?" Sarah gasped, looking from Patricia to me, confused by their sudden hostility. "Mom, Tyler, it was an accident. Dad, are you okay?" The sound of Sarah's voice seemed to snap Patricia back to reality. She realized she had broken character. She took a deep, shuddering breath, her hands clenching into fists at her sides before she forced them open. She plastered a pained, martyred expression onto her face. Oh my goodness," she stammered, her voice trembling with fake distress. "I am so sorry, Gerald. I just panicked. It is this dress I wanted to look nice for you." I didn't mean to yell. She walked around this table to me, but she did not look concerned. She looked like a predator assessing a wounded animal. She grabbed a napkin and started dabbing at the wine on the table, but her movements were aggressive, jerky. "It is okay, Patricia," I whispered, clutching my chest, playing up the shock. "I am sorry. My hand, it would not listen to me." Tyler picked up the sodden check. It was ruined. The ink was running the paper, dissolving in the wine. He crumpled it into a ball and threw it onto the table with disgust. "Well, that is $500,000 down the drain," he muttered, glaring at me. "We can write another one," Sarah said helpfully. "Dad, do you want me to write it for you?" "No," Patricia snapped. Then she softened her tone instantly. "No, sweetheart. Your father is clearly not well. Look at him. He is pale. He is shaking. The stress of the wedding is too much for him. We cannot ask him to handle financial matters in this state." She placed a hand on my shoulder. She squeezed. Hard. Her fingernails dug into my suit jacket, pinching the skin underneath. "We will handle this tomorrow," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that only I could hear. "When you are feeling more cooperative." She leaned down to kiss my cheek. It felt like the kiss of Judas. "Go upstairs, Gerald," she commanded softly. "Take your pills. Go to sleep. We will clean up this mess. We always clean up your messes." I looked at Tyler. He was staring at me with cold suspicion. He sensed something was wrong, but he could not prove it. The spilled wine had bought me 12 hours, but as I looked into Patricia's eyes one last time before standing up, I knew the clock was ticking faster than ever. I stood up, leaning heavily on my cane. I did not look at Sarah. I could not bear to see the pity in her eyes. I shuffled toward the door, leaving the dining room that smelled of wine and hatred. As I climbed the stairs, I heard them whispering below. "He is losing it," Tyler hissed. "He is becoming a liability." "We stick to the plan," Patricia replied, her voice calm and deadly. "Tonight was just a setback. Tomorrow he signs, one way or another. And if he shakes again, well, accidents happen on staircases all the time." I gripped the banister, my heart pounding against my ribs. I had won the battle of the dinner, but the war for my life would be decided at dawn. I needed Brandon. I needed the proof from Nevada. And I needed to stay alive long enough to use it. The silence in my study was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. It was a sound that used to comfort me, a reminder of order and precision, but tonight it sounded like a countdown. I sat in my leather armchair, the one I had bought 30 years ago when I landed my first major contract, and stared at the empty fireplace. My hands were still shaking, but not from the fake palsy I had displayed at dinner. They were shaking from the effort of holding back a scream that had been building in my throat for 12 hours. I heard a soft knock on the heavy oak door. I knew who it was before the handle turned. It was the only person in this house who knocked with hesitation. Patricia knocked with entitlement. Tyler knocked with arrogance. Only Sarah knocked as if she were afraid of what she might find on the other side. "Come in," I said, my voice sounding older and frailer than I ever intended. Sarah slipped into the room. She had changed out of her dinner dress into a soft blue robe, the same color her mother used to wear. Seeing her standing there framed by the dim light of the hallway felt like seeing a ghost. She had Eleanor's eyes, Eleanor's chin, and for a heartbreaking moment, I allowed myself to pretend that my late wife was standing there ready to tell me that this was all just a terrible nightmare. But then Sarah spoke and the illusion shattered. "Dad," she said softly, closing the door behind her. "I wanted to check on you. Patricia said you were agitated. She is worried you might have forgotten to take your evening blockers," Patricia says. Patricia thinks. Patricia worries. My daughter's vocabulary had been colonized by that woman. Every sentence Sarah spoke seemed to have Patricia's copyright stamp on it. "I took the pills, Sarah," I lied, shifting in my chair. "I am just tired. The wedding preparations, they are draining." Sarah walked over and sat on the ottoman at my feet. It was a gesture she had done since she was a little girl, whenever she wanted a story or a favor. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and searching. I saw love there, but I also saw a clouded, confused judgment that terrified me. "I know you are stressed, Dad," she said, reaching out to touch my knee. "And I know you are skeptical about the house in Tahoe. But Tyler and I really need this. We need a fresh start. And honestly, we need the money." I stiffened. The money again. It always came back to the money. "Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "it is not about the money. I would give you the world if I could. But does it not seem strange to you, the urgency? Why must it be done tonight? Why can't it wait until Monday? A man who loves you should be focused on the vows he is about to make, not the check his father-in-law is about to sign." Sarah pulled her hand away, as if my knee had turned into hot iron. Her expression hardened instantly. The softness vanished, replaced by a defensive wall I had seen her build brick by brick over the last 5 years. "Why do you always do this?" she asked, her voice rising. "Why do you always look for the flaw in the design? Tyler is not one of your contractors, Dad. He is not trying to cut corners with concrete. He is trying to build a future for us. But you just cannot stand to see me happy, can you?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I gasped, the air leaving my lungs. Not want to see her happy, I had lived for her happiness. I had worked 80-hour weeks to ensure she never knew a day of want. How can you say that? I whispered. Everything I have done, everything I have built is for you. No, it is not, Sarah snapped, standing up and pacing the small rug in front of the fireplace. It is for you. It is for your legacy. You built this empire to prove something to yourself, not for me. When Mom died, where were you, Dad? Were you at home holding me while I cried? No. You were at the site. You were in meetings. You were burying your grief in blueprints and steel beams while I was drowning in this big, empty house. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but the words died in my throat. She was right. When Eleanor died, I had shattered. I did not know how to handle the silence, so I filled it with noise and work. I thought I was providing for her. I thought I was being strong. I did not realize I was leaving the door open for a predator to walk in and take my place. And you know who was there? Sarah continued, her voice trembling with emotion. Patricia was there. She was the one who brushed my hair. She was the one who took me shopping for prom dresses when you were too busy meeting with investors. She was the one who listened to me talk about boys and school and life. She is more of a mother to me than you have been a father in the last decade. The words were precise, calculated, and devastating. I knew with absolute certainty that these were not Sarah's original thoughts. This was a script. This was a narrative Patricia had been feeding her drop by drop like poison in the ear. Your father doesn't care. Your father is obsessed with money. Only I love you. Only I understand you. Sarah. I said, leaning forward, ignoring the pain in my chest. I know I made mistakes. I know I was distant, and I will regret that until the day I die. But that does not mean you have to be blind to what is happening right now. Patricia, she is not who you think she is. And Tyler, Sarah, please. Look at him, really look at him. He is manipulating you. Sarah spun around, her face flushed with anger. Don't you dare talk about them like that. They are the only people who have stood by me while you turned into this bitter, paranoid old man. Patricia warned me you would do this. She said your dementia was making you suspicious. She said you would try to sabotage the wedding because you are afraid of being alone. My dementia. The lie was so complete, so all-encompassing, that it had become her reality. I was trapped in a cage of their making. If I spoke the truth, it was proof of my insanity. If I stayed silent, it was proof of my consent. I am not afraid of being alone, Sarah, I said quietly. I am afraid of leaving you alone with wolves. Sarah laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Wolves, you are the wolf, Dad. You are the one growling at everyone who tries to get close. You are the one threatening to cut us off if we don't dance to your tune. Tyler loves me. He treats me like a queen. And Patricia loves you, God knows why. She changes your sheets, she manages your doctors, she puts up with your moods, and you treat her like a servant. It is disgusting. She walked back to the door, her hand on the knob. She looked back at me and her eyes were cold. You are going to sign that check tomorrow, Dad. Not because I am asking you to, but because if you don't, if you humiliate Tyler and Patricia one more time, I will leave this house after the wedding, and I will never come back. You will have your money, and you will have your big empty house, and you will die in it alone, just like you deserve. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the room, vibrating in the floorboards. I sat there frozen. The silence rushed back in, but now it was suffocating. My own daughter had just disowned me. She had just confirmed that my enemy was her savior. She had looked me in the eye and told me I deserved to die alone. Tears blurred my vision, hot and stinging. I wanted to weep. I wanted to chase after her and beg for forgiveness. I wanted to sign the check just to keep her in my life for one more day. The temptation to surrender was overwhelming. Why fight? Why not just let them have the money? I had plenty. Maybe if I gave them what they wanted, they would spare me. Maybe they would treat Sarah well if they got the cash. But then I touched the button camera on my chest. I felt the hard plastic against my skin. If I gave in now, Sarah would never be free. Tyler would drain the 10 million, and when the money ran out, or when he got bored, he would discard her. Or worse. Brandon's words echoed in my mind. Accidents happen. If Sarah became an obstacle to their lifestyle, she would suffer the same fate they had planned for me. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. The sadness did not leave, but it was pushed down, compressed into a dense, heavy fuel. Sarah hated me right now. That was fine. Let her hate me. Let her despise me, as long as she was alive to do it. I stood up and walked to the window. Down in the garden, the wedding marquee was a skeletal shape in the moonlight. It looked like a cage. I am going to burn it down, I whispered to the glass. I am going to burn it all down to save you, Sarah. And one day, even if you never speak to me again, you will be free. I checked my watch. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Brandon would be landing in Nevada in 3 hours. I had to hold on. I had to endure the hatred of the person I loved most in the world for 24 more hours. I went back to my desk and pulled out a fresh checkbook from the drawer. I opened it to the first page. I picked up my pen. I wrote the date. I wrote Tyler's name. I wrote $500,000. And then I signed it. Gerald S. Vance. But I did not tear it out. I left it there open on the desk. This was the bait. Tomorrow morning, when Patricia came in to check on me, she would see it. She would see that I had surrendered. She would think she had broken me. She would think the threat of losing Sarah had worked. It would make them careless. It would make them arrogant. It would make them think the game was over. And that was exactly when we would strike. I turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. I sat there in the dark, waiting for the sunrise, waiting for the battle, feeling the weight of my daughter's hatred sitting on my chest like a stone. It was the heaviest thing I had ever carried, but I would carry it. I would carry it all the way to the altar. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our kitchen, casting long, sharp shadows across the granite countertops. It should have been a beautiful start to the day before the wedding, but the air inside the house felt stagnant, heavy with unspoken threats. I sat at the breakfast island, my hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes ago. I was not drinking it. I was not eating the eggs Benedict the cook had prepared. I was staring at the small crystal saucer in front of me. On it lay 2 pills. They were small, oblong, and a pale shade of blue. For 5 years, my heart medication had been a round white tablet. I knew its shape better than I knew the lines on my own palm. But 3 weeks ago, Patricia had told me the pharmacy changed suppliers. She said it was the same formula, just a different generic brand. Like a fool, I had believed her. I had swallowed them dutifully, thanking her for taking care of my refills. And for 3 weeks, I had felt the fog rolling in, the tremors in my hands, the sudden spikes of anxiety that made my heart race faster than the condition they were supposed to treat. Now I knew why. Brandon had analyzed the sample I gave him in the garage. These were not for my heart. They were a potent cocktail of psychotropic drugs designed to induce confusion, paranoia, and in high enough doses, vivid hallucinations. She was not just poisoning my body. She was systematically dismantling my mind. She wanted a crazy husband, someone whose testimony would be laughed out of court, someone who could be legally declared incompetent, so she could take power of attorney over my entire estate. "Good morning, sleepyhead." Patricia breezed into the kitchen, smelling of lavender and expensive deception. She was wearing a silk robe that shimmered as she moved. She walked straight to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy like a shackle. You have not touched your breakfast, Gerald, she cooed, her voice dripping with that sickeningly sweet concern. You need your strength. Tomorrow is the big day. I slowly turned my head to look at her. I had to play the part. I had to be the confused, deteriorating old man she'd created. I am not hungry, I stammered, letting a slight tremor enter my voice. The food, it tastes metallic. Like old pennies. Patricia's eyes lit up for a fraction of a second. A metallic taste was a common side effect of the poison. She knew it was working. Oh, darling, that is just your nerves, she said, picking up the saucer with the pills. Here, take your medicine. It will help settle your stomach and calm your heart. You were so agitated last night. We do not want another accident, do we? She held the pills out to me. Her other hand held a glass of water. This was the moment of truth. I could not swallow them, but I could not refuse them either. If I refused, she would force them on me, or worse, slip them into my food where I could not see them. I reached out with a shaking hand and took the pills. I placed them on my tongue. I took a large gulp of water. Patricia watched my throat. She was looking for the swallow. I gulped loud and hard, letting the water go down, but I used my tongue to slide the pills into the pocket of space between my gum and my cheek. It was a trick I had learned from a documentary about prison inmates. It was uncomfortable, the bitter coating starting to dissolve against my cheek, but I held them there. Good boy, Patricia said, patting my head as if I were a dog. Now I am going to go check on the florists. You just relax here. Rosa is cleaning the living room if you need anything. She turned her back to pour herself some coffee. I seized the opportunity. I pretended to cough, bringing my napkin up to my mouth. In one fluid motion, I spat the pills into the thick fabric of the napkin, folded it over, and shoved it deep into the pocket of my robe. I took another sip of water to clear the bitter taste. I had survived the morning dose. Now came the performance. Brandon had told me that for the trap to work, they needed to believe I was in the final stages of the breakdown. They needed to believe I was completely gone. If they thought I was incapacitated, they would stop whispering. They would start talking out loud. I stood up, gripping the edge of the counter. I waited for Rosa, our housekeeper of 10 years, to walk into the kitchen with her mop bucket. Rosa was a good woman. She was loyal, but she was simple. She believed what she saw. If she saw me losing my mind, she would tell Patricia. She would be the perfect witness to my insanity. Rosa entered, humming a tune. She stopped when she saw me standing there, swaying slightly. Mr. Gerald, she asked, can I get you anything? I stared at her. I widened my eyes until they burned. I looked past her at the blank white wall behind the refrigerator. Who is that? I whispered, pointing a trembling finger at the empty space. Rosa turned around, confused. Who, sir? There is no one there, I screamed. It was a guttural, terrified sound that tore from my throat. I backed away, knocking over the bar stool. It crashed to the floor with a deafening bang. Tell him to get out, I yelled, my voice cracking with fake hysteria. The man in the black coat, he is holding a knife, Rosa. Look out, he is right behind you. Rosa dropped her mop. Her hands flew to her mouth. Mr. Gerald, no. It is just the wall. There is no man. I grabbed a ceramic bowl from the counter and hurled it at the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, shards of pottery flying everywhere. Get away from me, I shrieked, cowering against the oven. Do not touch me. I know who you are. You are the devil. Patricia came running back into the room, alerted by the crash. Tyler was right behind her, having just come in from the gym. What is happening? Patricia yelled. Rosa was crying now, terrified. He is seeing things, ma'am. He threw the bowl. He says there is a man with a knife. I slid down to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I rocked back and forth, muttering gibberish. The spiders. I whispered loud enough for them to hear. The spiders are coming out of the electrical sockets. They are going to eat the wedding cake. Burn them. We have to burn them all. I looked up at Patricia through my lashes. I saw her reaction. She was not horrified. She was not scared. She was smiling. It was a small, tight smile of absolute victory. She looked at Tyler, and the look they exchanged chilled me to the bone. It said, "We did it. He is broken." Patricia rushed over to me, avoiding the broken pottery. She knelt down, but she did not hug me. She grabbed my wrists, her grip bruising. "Gerald, stop this," she commanded, her voice loud and theatrical for Rosa's benefit. "You are hallucinating again. Rosa, call Dr. Evans. Tell him Mr. Vance is having an episode. Tell him we might need that emergency sedative." "No," I screamed, pulling away from her. "No doctor." "The doctor is one of them. He has snakes in his stethoscope." Tyler stepped forward. He did not look concerned. He looked annoyed, like someone dealing with a broken appliance. "Let's just get him upstairs, Pat," he said. "We can't have him acting like a lunatic when the caterers arrive. Lock him in the bedroom if you have to." They hauled me to my feet. I went limp, letting them drag me like a sack of potatoes. I kept muttering about spiders and knives. As they pulled me past Rosa, I saw the heartbreak in her eyes. I felt a pang of guilt. I was terrifying this poor woman. But I had to do it. Her testimony that Mr. Gerald saw a man with a knife would be the final proof Patricia needed to think she was safe. They dragged me up the stairs and into the master bedroom. Tyler threw me onto the bed. "Stay there, old man," he sneered. "And shut up about the spiders." Patricia stood at the door. She looked at me, her face composed, her mask back in place. "I will bring you some warm milk, Gerald," she said. "Just try to sleep." She closed the door. I heard the lock click. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. My heart was pounding, but my mind was crystal clear. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. I rolled off the bed and crept to the door. I pressed my ear against the wood. They were in the hallway. They thought I was sedated, confused, and locked away. They thought they were alone. Can you believe that Tyler's voice came through the wood, muffled but audible? "He is completely cooked. Did you see Rosa's face? She will testify he is batshit crazy." Patricia laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. The dosage was perfect. Dr. Evans said it would take a week, but he cracked in 3 days. By tomorrow at the wedding, he will be drooling in a wheelchair. We won't even need to force him to sign the papers. I can get emergency guardianship by Monday morning. "We should double the dose tonight," Tyler suggested. "Just to be sure. I don't want him waking up and making a scene during the vows." "No," Patricia replied. "Too much will stop his heart before we get the money. Stick to the plan. We keep him high as a kite until the ceremony is over. Once Sarah says 'I do' and the funds transfer, then we can give him the final cocktail. The one that looks like a stroke." I covered my mouth with my hand to stifle a gasp. I had known they were bad. I had known they were greedy. But hearing it spoken aloud, the cold, calculated plan to murder me right after the wedding, was a different kind of horror. They were not just waiting for me to die. They were scheduling my execution. I slid down the doorframe, my legs shaking. This time, the fear was real. I was trapped in my room, locked in by people who planned to kill me in less than 48 hours. But then I remembered the earpiece. I remembered the burner phone hidden in the mattress. I crawled to the bed and dug the phone out. I had recorded the last 2 minutes. I had them. I had the conversation about the dosage. I had the threat of the final cocktail. My finger hovered over the send button to Brandon. But I hesitated. Was it enough? It proved they were drugging me, yes. But Patricia could claim it was just talk or that I had doctored the recording. I needed the final nail. I needed the bigamy. I needed Silvio. I sent the audio file to Brandon with a text. "They are accelerating. They plan to OD me after the ceremony. Tell me you have Silvio. I watched the little circle spin as the message sent. Ding! The reply came instantly. Silvio is in the car. We are driving through the night. Stay alive, Dad. Do not eat anything. Do not drink anything unless you open the bottle yourself. We are coming. I deleted the messages and hid the phone again. I lay back on the bed, closing my eyes. Let them think I was crazy. Let them think I was seeing spiders. In reality, I was the spider. I was weaving a web so thick and so sticky that by the time they realized they were caught, it would be too late to struggle. I heard the key turn in the lock again. I went limp, letting my mouth hang open, my eyes unfocused. Patricia walked in with a glass of warm milk. Here you go, darling, she whispered, placing it on the nightstand. Drink up. It will help you sleep. She stroked my hair. It felt like a spider crawling on my skin. I waited until she left. Then I took the milk to the bathroom and poured it down the sink. It was thick and white, and as it swirled down the drain, I imagined it was her freedom disappearing into the sewer. I returned to bed and stared at the ceiling. The hunger in my stomach was painful, but the hunger for justice was stronger. I would starve before I let them win. I would endure the hallucinations of my own fear, because tomorrow the dead would rise and the wicked would fall. While I lay imprisoned in my own bedroom, playing the part of a senile old man waiting for death, my son Brandon was 3,000 miles away, fighting the ghosts of my wife's past. The burner phone hidden inside my mattress vibrated against my ribs. It was the lifeline I had been praying for. I pulled the blanket over my head to muffle any sound and pressed the small device to my ear. The connection was clear, but the background noise told a story of its own. I heard the whistle of dry desert wind and the crunch of gravel under heavy boots. Brandon was in Nevada. I am here, Dad, Brandon's voice came through tight with tension. I am at the address on the old license. It is a trailer park on the outskirts of Henderson, the kind of place people go when they want to disappear. I closed my eyes, visualizing the scene. My architect's mind constructed the image instantly. Dilapidated aluminum boxes, baking under the relentless sun dust, coating the windows, the smell of stagnation and lost hope. It was a world away from the manicured lawns and marble floors of the prison I was currently trapped in, yet the two places were now inextricably linked by one woman's greed. Be careful, son, I whispered into the phone. If she ruined him, he might not be friendly. I am not looking for friends, Brandon replied grimly. I am looking for answers. I listened as he knocked on a metal door. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silence of my room. There was a long pause, then the creak of rusty hinges. Yeah. What do you want? The voice that answered was rough. The voice of a man whose vocal cords had been stripped raw by cheap whiskey and years of shouting at walls. Silvio Dante, Brandon asked. Who's asking? My name is Brandon Vance. I am here about Patricia Miller. There was a silence on the line so profound I thought the call had dropped. Then a harsh, dry laugh rattled through the speaker. It sounded like dry leaves scraping over concrete. Patricia, the man, spat the name out like it was a piece of rotting meat. I haven't heard that name in 5 years. Is she dead? Did someone finally put a stake through her heart? No, Brandon said, his voice steady. She is about to destroy my father. I need to know the truth, Silvio. I need to know about the divorce. Divorce? No. Silvio laughed again, louder this time, bordering on hysterical. Kid, you got the wrong idea. Come in. If you have whiskey, bring it. If not, just bring your ears. You are going to need them. I heard the door close, cutting off the wind. The audio quality improved. I was now a fly on the wall in a trailer in the Nevada desert, listening to the man who had come before me, the ghost of Christmas past. Silvio Dante was not the monster I had feared. As he spoke, I realized he was a mirror image of what I was becoming. He had been a shift manager at a casino making good money. Then he met Patricia. She was a cocktail waitress, then beautiful, charming, just as she had been with me. She stripped me clean, Silvio's voice rasped. It started small, paying off her debts. Then her sick mother needed surgery. Then it was investment schemes. By the time I realized she was funneling money into offshore accounts, I had lost the house, the car, and my job. She didn't just take my money, kid. She took my dignity. She made me look crazy. She told everyone I was a gambling addict, that I was stealing from the casino. I shivered under my duvet. The playbook was identical. She had painted him as an addict. She was painting me as senile. She was a predator with a single perfect hunting strategy. But the divorce, Brandon pressed. We have a document. It is dated October 14th, 5 years ago, signed by Judge Henderson in Las Vegas. I heard the sound of paper being unfolded. Then a heavy thud, likely a fist hitting a table. I never signed papers, Silvio said. I never saw a judge. One day I came home and she was gone. The bank accounts were empty, and there was a note on the fridge that said, "Good luck." That was it. I didn't chase her because I couldn't afford a lawyer. I just let her go. I figured she was someone else's problem. My heart hammered against my ribs. If Silvio never signed, if he never went to court, then the document Patricia gave me before our wedding was a forgery. Brandon's voice came back on the line, sharp and urgent. "Dad, are you hearing this?" "I am hearing it," I whispered. "But we need proof. Her word against his is not enough. She will say he is lying, that he is a bitter ex-husband looking for a payout." "I am way ahead of you," Brandon said. "Silvio, get your coat. We are going to the Clark County Hall of Records." The line went dead for the drive. I lay in the silence, my mind racing. If this was true, if she had forged the divorce decree, the implications were nuclear. In the eyes of the law, you cannot have two spouses. If she was still legally married to Silvio when she married me, our marriage was void from the start. It meant she was not my wife. She was not my heir. She had no claim to my house, my money, or my life insurance. And more importantly, it was a felony. Bigamy, fraud, forgery. An hour later, the phone buzzed again. I answered instantly. "Dad," Brandon said. His voice was different now. It wasn't anxious anymore. It was cold. It was the voice of a prosecutor who just found the murder weapon. "We are at the clerk's office. I have the registrar right here. I am going to put him on speaker." Mr. Vance, a stranger's voice, spoke. "I have run a search on Silvio Dante and Patricia Ann Miller. I have gone back 20 years. I see a marriage certificate from 2003. But, sir, there is no record of a divorce. None. The file is still open. And the decree my father has," Brandon asked. "The one signed by Judge Henderson, I checked that too," the clerk continued. "We did have a Judge Henderson, but he passed away in 2016. The date you gave me for this document is 2018. Unless Judge Henderson came back from the grave to sign your stepmother's divorce papers, that document is a complete fabrication. It is a federal offense." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The relief was so intense it was almost painful. Tears streamed down my face, soaking the pillow. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't senile. I was the victim of a massive criminal deception. "We have it," Brandon said, taking the phone back. "We have the certified copy of the marriage license. We have an affidavit from the clerk stating no divorce exists. And we have Silvio. He is coming with me." "Coming with you?" I asked. "He wants to see her," Brandon said. "He wants to look her in the eye when the cuffs go on. He says it is the only closure he will ever get." "We are heading to the airport now. We will be there by morning." I looked at the clock. It was late afternoon. The rehearsal dinner was tonight. The wedding was tomorrow at noon. They were cutting it close. Dad, listen to me, Brandon said. You have to hold on. Do not let them suspect anything. If she knows we found Silvio, she will run. She will drain the accounts electronically and disappear before we land. You have to keep playing the part. Be the confused, dying old man for one more night. I can do it, I said, my voice gaining strength. I will be the best actor you have ever seen. I hung up the phone and hid it back in the mattress. I felt a surge of energy that had nothing to do with food or medicine. It was the power of truth. I lay there and formulated my plan. I wouldn't just wait. I would bait the trap. Half an hour later, the lock clicked. Patricia entered. She was carrying a tray with soup. She looked tired, but there was a manic energy in her eyes. The wedding stress was getting to her, or maybe it was the anticipation of the payday. How is my patient? She asked, setting the tray down. I sat up slowly. I let my head loll to the side. I looked at her with vacant eyes. The birds, I mumbled. The birds are singing backwards. Patricia sighed, shaking her head. Drink your soup, Gerald. Tyler is downstairs handling the final vendor payments. We have a big day tomorrow. She turned to leave, but I reached out and grabbed her wrist. I made sure my grip was weak, trembling. Patricia, I whined. The check. I think I signed it. She froze. She spun around, her eyes wide. What did you say? I pointed a shaking finger toward the desk in the corner. I didn't want you to be mad at me. I didn't want the man with the knife to come back. So I signed it. Patricia practically ran to the desk. She saw the checkbook lying open. She saw the check for $500,000 signed with my jagged, shaky signature. She picked it up, inspecting it like a diamond. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. Oh, Gerald, she whispered. You finally did something right. She turned to me, and for a moment she almost looked like the woman I fell in love with. But it was a mask. It was all a mask. Thank you, darling, she said. This will make everything so much easier. She tucked the check into her cleavage close to her heart, or where her heart should have been. Now sleep, she said. Tomorrow you will be the father of the bride. We need you to look presentable for the photos. She left the room, locking the door behind her. I heard her footsteps running down the hall, likely to show Tyler the prize. I lay back on the pillows and smiled. She had the check. She thought she had won. She didn't know that the check was drawn on an account I had frozen 3 hours ago using the burner phone's banking app. When Tyler tried to deposit that mobile check tomorrow morning, it would bounce. And it would trigger a fraud alert that would ping Brandon's phone. But more importantly, her confidence would be her undoing. She would be so focused on the money, so sure of her victory, that she wouldn't look over her shoulder. She wouldn't see the storm coming from Nevada. She wouldn't see Silvio Dante. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to rest. I needed the energy. Because tomorrow, when the preacher asked if anyone objected to this union, I was going to stand up. And I wasn't just going to object to the marriage. I was going to object to the last 5 years of lies. The game was set, the players were moving, and the king was about to checkmate the queen. The house was silent, as a tomb wrapped in the stillness of 3 a.m., but in my ears, the bass of a nightclub was thumping like a second heartbeat. I sat in the darkness of my study, the glow of the tablet illuminating my face, watching the final act of Tyler's arrogance play out in high definition. Brandon had not just sent a listener. He had compromised the security system of the VIP lounge at the Velvet Room, the most exclusive club in the city. On the screen, Tyler was not the respectful, devoted fiancé he pretended to be at my dinner table. He was a predator, unmasked drunk on expensive scotch and the certainty of his own victory. He sat on a plush velvet sofa surrounded by a group of men who were laughing too loudly at his jokes. Among them was a man in a gray suit sipping water. Tyler did not know him. He thought the man was just another wealthy patron Brandon had positioned there. In reality, he was a private investigator with a microphone recording every slur and every boast. I watched Tyler raise a glass of amber liquid to the light. He looked sweaty, disheveled, and euphoric. He looked like a man who had just pulled off the heist of the century. To the old man, Tyler shouted over the music, clinking his glass against the others. To Gerald Vance, the goose that laid the golden egg. May he rest in peace, and may he do it quickly. The table erupted in laughter. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Hearing him wish for my death was not surprising anymore, but seeing the glee in his eyes, the sheer joy he took in my destruction, was a different kind of pain. The man in the gray suit leaned in. He played his part perfectly, looking impressed and slightly envious. "You really pulled it off, Ty," the investigator said, his voice cutting clearly through the background noise thanks to the high-tech audio filter Brandon was using. "But aren't you worried the prenup, the family lawyers, those guys are sharks?" Tyler waved his hand dismissively, spilling scotch on his expensive trousers. He didn't care. He was too rich to care about stains now. Lawyers. Tyler scoffed. "Lawyers can't touch what they can't see. We have been planning this for 5 years, man. 5 years of playing the long game. Sarah is wrapped around my finger. She thinks I am her soulmate. She thinks I am saving her from her toxic father." He laughed again, a wet, ugly sound. Toxic. That is the word Patricia taught her. It is amazing what you can make people believe if you repeat it enough times. "Patricia seems really invested in this," the investigator prodded gently. "For a mother-in-law, she is pretty involved in your finances." Tyler leaned back, draping his arm over the sofa. He looked around the room, his eyes bleary but cunning. He lowered his voice, leaning in toward the investigator, as if sharing a state secret. "Mother-in-law," he sneered, shaking his head. "You guys don't know the half of it. She is not just some lady I met. She is family. Blood." My breath caught in my throat. This was it. The confirmation we needed on tape. "She is my aunt," Tyler whispered, a sloppy grin spreading across his face. "Patricia, my mother's sister. She raised me after my folks split. She taught me everything I know. How to spot a mark, how to dress, how to smile so they don't see the teeth." He took a long swig of his drink. "We worked Miami together back in the day," he continued, the alcohol loosening his tongue completely. "Small-time stuff, insurance scams, lonely widows, but Gerald was the whale. When she landed him 5 years ago, she called me and said, 'Ty, get to Chicago. I found the retirement plan.'" I stared at the screen, my hands gripping the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. It was one thing to suspect it. It was another to hear it. My marriage, my life, my family, it was all just a retirement plan for 2 grifters from Florida. "So what is the split?" the investigator asked. 50-50, Tyler said, slamming his empty glass down. "Once the old man kicks the bucket, Patricia gets the estate, and I get the trust fund through Sarah. We pool it, we liquidate the assets, and we vanish. Maybe Europe? Maybe South America. Somewhere with no extradition treaties." "And the girl?" the investigator asked. Sarah Tyler shrugged. It was the most chilling gesture I had ever seen. "Sarah is sweet," he said, "but she is high maintenance. Once the money is secure, well, marriages fail all the time. Or maybe she has an accident. Who knows, tragedies run in the family, right? Her mom died young. It would be a shame if history repeated itself." I shut the tablet off. I could not watch anymore. If I listened to one more second, I would have driven down there and put a bullet in his head myself. And that would have ruined everything. I sat in the dark, breathing heavily. The rage was gone. The hurt was gone. In their place was a cold, hard block of ice. He had threatened my daughter's life. He had confessed to the conspiracy. He had admitted to the blood relation. And he had done it all on a recording that was now safely stored on Brandon's secure server. I stood up and walked to the window. The sky was beginning to turn a majestic purple in the east. The sun was coming. The wedding day was dawning. For Tyler, this sunrise marked the beginning of his triumph. He thought he was waking up to a coronation. He thought he was hours away from $10 million. He had no idea that he was waking up to his funeral. I walked to the closet and pulled out my tuxedo. It was the same one I had worn to gala openings of buildings I had designed. It was a suit of armor. I brushed the lapel, smoothing out the fabric. I was not going to sleep tonight. There was no point. I needed to be sharp. I needed to be ready. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The face staring back at me in the mirror was lined and gray, but the eyes were fierce. They were the eyes of a man who had built skyscrapers that withstood hurricanes. I had let my foundation crumble for a few years. I had let the termites in, but today I was going to fumigate the house. I checked my phone. A text from Brandon. Got it all. Crystal clear. We are landing in an hour. Silvio is ready. The police chief is meeting us at the venue. Showtime, Dad. I typed back a single word. Ready. I went downstairs to the kitchen. The house was starting to stir. I heard the distant clatter of the catering staff setting up in the garden. I heard the florists arranging thousands of dollars worth of white roses. It was a production, a spectacle. And I was the director of the final act. Patricia came down the stairs a few minutes later. She was wearing a silk kimono looking rested and radiant. She saw me standing by the coffee machine fully dressed in my tuxedo at 5 a.m. Gerald, she asked, surprised. You are up early and... You are dressed, I turned to her. I did not smile. I did not frown. I gave her nothing. I wanted to be ready. Patricia, I said, my voice steady. It is a big day. I want to make sure everything goes exactly according to plan. She looked at me suspiciously for a moment, scanning my face for signs of the dementia, for the weakness she had cultivated. But I held my ground. I let her see just enough of the old Gerald to make her uneasy, but not enough to make her run. Well, she said, forcing a smile, you look very handsome. Sarah will be so proud. Yes, I said, taking a sip of black coffee. I think she will be surprised. I think everyone will be surprised. Patricia hesitated, sensing a shift in the air, but her greed blinded her to the danger. She patted my arm, her touch patronizing. Just try to relax, Gerald. Don't overexert yourself. We don't want you having an episode in front of the guests. I watched her walk away to shout orders at the florists. She walked with the confidence of a queen in her castle. I drank my coffee, feeling the caffeine hit my bloodstream. Enjoy it, Patricia, I thought. Enjoy the flowers. Enjoy the silk. Enjoy the power. Because in 6 hours, the only thing you will be wearing is an orange jumpsuit, and the only room you will command is a 6x8 cell. The sun broke over the horizon, bathing the wedding venue in golden light. It was a beautiful day for a wedding, but it was an even better day for justice. The black tuxedo hung in the back of my closet like a relic from a past life. It was a Brioni tailored in Italy 20 years ago for the night I accepted the Architect of the Year award. I had not worn it since Eleanor's funeral. For the last 5 years, Patricia had dressed me in cardigans and slacks, soft clothes for a soft man, clothes that signaled to the world that my working days were over. But today, I did not reach for the beige cashmere. I reached for the black silk. Putting it on was a battle. My fingers, still stiff from weeks of sedatives, fumbled with the pearl buttons of the shirt. I had to force them to cooperate, willing the fine motor skills to return through sheer hatred of the people waiting downstairs. I pulled the trousers on. They were a little loose around the waist. I had lost weight. The poison had done its job, carving the meat from my bones, leaving me looking skeletal and frail. But as I tightened the belt, I felt a strange sense of power returning. The armor still fit. The structure was still there. I stood before the full-length mirror in my dressing room. The man staring back at me was a stranger. His skin was gray, the color of wet ash. His cheeks were sunken. His hair was thinner than I remembered. To anyone looking at this reflection, I was a man at the end of his road, a man defeated by time and illness. But then I leaned closer to the glass. I looked into my own eyes. They were not the eyes of a victim. They were burning. A cold blue fire raged behind the pupils, fueled by the knowledge of what was about to happen. I adjusted my bow tie. Eleanor used to do this for me. I could almost feel her cool fingers on my neck, could almost hear her whispering that I looked dashing. I closed my eyes for a moment, summoning her strength. Eleanor, I whispered to the empty room. Forgive me for what I am about to do. I am going to ruin her day. I am going to break her heart. But I have to break it to save it. I opened my eyes. The sentimentality vanished. It was replaced by tactical precision. I checked the inside pocket of the jacket. It was there. The envelope. Thick, heavy, sealed with wax. Inside was the death warrant for Patricia's freedom, the affidavit from Nevada, the toxicity report from the lab Brandon used, the USB drive with the recording of Tyler laughing about killing me. I patted the pocket. It was the most dangerous weapon I had ever carried. I am not walking my daughter down the aisle. I thought the words echoing in my mind like a mantra. I am walking her out of hell. She thinks she is walking toward a castle, but she is walking into a slaughterhouse. And I am the only one with the key to the back door. A knock on the door broke my concentration. Gerald, it was Patricia. Her voice was high, excited, vibrating with the thrill of imminent wealth. Are you ready? The limousine is here. We cannot be late. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I grabbed my cane. I erased the fire from my eyes and replaced it with the dull, watery gaze of the confused old man she expected. I opened the door. Patricia was wearing a gold dress that screamed money. She looked like a trophy. She looked like a winner. Oh, she said, stopping to look me up and down. You actually look decent. I was worried we would have to wheelchair you in. She reached out and straightened my lapel, her fingers brushing against the pocket that held the evidence that would send her to prison. She had no idea. She was touching the electric fence and she didn't even feel the hum. I am ready, Patricia, I said, my voice shaking just the right amount. Is she happy? Patricia laughed, taking my arm and leading me toward the stairs. Happy she is, ecstatic. She thinks she has won the lottery. And in a way she has. We all have. We walked down the grand staircase together. The house was empty of guests. They were all at the venue. It was just us, the servants, and the ghosts of the lies told within these walls. Tyler was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He was wearing a white tuxedo. He looked like a prince in a fairy tale if the prince was a sociopath who drugged old men. Looking sharp, Pops, he said, checking his watch. But let's move. The schedule is tight. We need that signature on the register by 1 p.m. sharp. The register. The legal transfer of Sarah's trust. That was all they cared about. The vows were just the preamble to the wire transfer. I looked at him. I imagined the handcuffs clicking around those wrists. It took every ounce of my willpower not to smile. Let's go, I mumbled. I don't want to miss the cake. The drive to the venue was a blur of white leather seats and champagne I pretended to sip. Patricia and Tyler ignored me talking over my head about honeymoon destinations and real estate listings. They were already spending the money. They were dividing the spoils while the victim was still sitting next to them. We arrived at the Botanical Gardens. It was spectacular. White tents, thousands of orchids, a string quartet playing Mozart. It was the wedding Sarah had always dreamed of. It was perfect. And it was all a stage for the greatest con game ever played. As I stepped out of the car, leaning heavily on my cane, I scanned the crowd. I saw the faces of Chicago's elite. Bankers, developers, politicians, people I had worked with for decades. They looked at me with pity. Poor Gerald, their eyes said. He is barely holding on. But I wasn't looking for them. I was looking for one man. I saw him standing near the entrance to the main tent. Frank Reynolds, the chief of police. We had played poker together every Tuesday night for 20 years until Patricia made me stop. He was in his dress uniform looking uncomfortable among the flowers. He had come because he thought he was saying goodbye to an old friend who was losing his mind. He didn't know he was on duty. I shuffled toward him. Patricia tried to steer me toward the waiting room, but I resisted. Frank, I called out, my voice weak. Frank, Patricia sighed. We don't have time for chatting, Gerald. Just a moment, dear, I wheezed. It is Frank. Frank saw me and walked over, his face softening with concern. Gerald. Good to see you, buddy. You look... I know how I look, Frank, I interrupted, gripping his hand. But looks can be deceiving. I pulled him into a hug. It looked like the embrace of two old friends. But in the clinch, I slipped the thick envelope from my pocket and pressed it into his hand. Patricia was looking at her phone, checking a text from the caterer. She didn't see the handoff. Frank stiffened. He felt the weight of the package. He pulled back slightly, looking into my eyes. I dropped the act for 1 second. Just 1 second. I let him see the clarity. I let him see the fire. Open it when the preacher asks for objections. I whispered, my voice steel hard. Do not open it before, and have your men ready at the back exit. Frank was a good cop. He didn't ask questions. He didn't gasp. He saw the desperation and the sanity in my eyes, and he slipped the envelope into his jacket in one smooth motion. I promise, he whispered back. Patricia grabbed my arm. Gerald, come on. Sarah is waiting to take photos before the ceremony. I let her drag me away. I looked back at Frank. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. The trap was set. The police were in place. We went into the bridal suite. Sarah was standing on a pedestal surrounded by bridesmaids. When she saw me, the room went quiet. She looked breathtaking. The dress was a cloud of lace and silk. She looked like an angel, but her eyes were red. She had been crying. Dad, she said, her voice guarded. I walked over to her. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to tell her to take off the dress and run. But I couldn't. She wouldn't believe me. Not yet. She needed to see that the monster unmasked. You look beautiful, Sarah, I said, my voice cracking with genuine emotion. Your mother would have been so proud. Sarah's lip trembled. She looked at Patricia, then back at me. Please don't ruin this, Dad, she whispered. Please just be happy for me. I took her hands. They were cold. I am doing this because I love you, I said. Remember that. No matter what happens in the next hour, remember that I love you more than my own life. She looked confused by the intensity of my words. Before she could ask what I meant, the wedding coordinator burst in with a headset. It is time, everyone in places. The groom is at the altar. The music swelled outside. The wedding march. Patricia kissed Sarah on the cheek. I will see you out there, baby girl. She turned to me. Don't trip, Gerald. She left to take her seat in the front row, the seat of honor. I stood next to my daughter. She hooked her arm through mine. I could feel her heart racing against my arm. Ready, Dad? She asked. I looked at the closed doors that led to the garden. Beyond those doors, Tyler was waiting. Beyond those doors, the trap was waiting. I gripped my cane. I straightened my back just a little. I am ready, I said. The doors opened. The sunlight hit us. The faces of 300 guests turned to look. I stepped forward, leading my daughter down the aisle. Every step was a countdown. Every step brought us closer to the explosion. I saw Tyler at the end of the long white carpet. He was smiling. He saw the old man and the naive girl. He saw the money. I looked at Frank Reynolds in the second row. He had his hand inside his jacket, clutching the envelope. I looked at the back of the venue. I saw a figure standing in the shadows wearing a baseball cap. Brandon. And next to him, a man with a weathered face and a cheap suit, Silvio. My team was here. I squeezed Sarah's hand. Let's go get him, I thought. We reached the altar. I handed Sarah's hand to Tyler. He took it with a smug confidence that made my bile rise. Who gives this woman to be married to this man? The preacher asked. I do, I said. But as I sat down in the front row right next to Patricia, I leaned in close to her ear. She smelled of victory. I hope you enjoyed the check, Patricia, I whispered. She smiled without looking at me. It will clear by Monday, darling. I checked my watch. 12:15 p.m. The clock had run out. The rehearsal was over. The real show was about to begin. The botanical gardens had been transformed into a fantasy of white silk and pale pink roses. It was the kind of setting that appeared on the covers of bridal magazines, a scene so perfect it felt artificial. The air was thick with the scent of 10,000 flowers, a perfume so heavy it felt suffocating, masking the rot that lay beneath the surface of this family. I stood at the entrance of the long aisle, the white carpet stretching out before me like a runway. To everyone else, this was a celebration of love. To me, it was the final approach to a controlled demolition. The string quartet began to play Pachelbel's Canon. The melody floated through the humid air, sweet and melancholic. It was the signal. I felt Sarah's hand tighten on my arm. I looked down at her. My daughter. My little girl. She was trembling. Through the layers of expensive lace and silk of her designer gown, I could feel the vibration of her anxiety. It wasn't just the jitters of a bride. It was the deep, instinctual fear of a prey animal that knows it is walking into a trap, even if its conscious mind refuses to see it. Breathe, sweetheart, I whispered, patting her hand with my own. Just breathe. She looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She looked so much like her mother in that moment that my heart physically ached. I am scared, Dad, she murmured, her voice barely audible over the music. I wanted to stop right there. I wanted to grab her shoulders and scream the truth into her face. I wanted to tell her that the man waiting for her was a monster, that the woman sitting in the front row was a thief, and that her entire romance was a fabricated lie designed to steal her inheritance. The urge to protect her, to pull her away from the edge of the cliff, was so strong it made my knees weak. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I stopped now, we would just be causing a scene. Patricia would spin it. She would say I was having a dementia episode. She would say I was jealous. Sarah would pull away from me and run to Tyler, and I would lose her forever. Number 1. I had to let her walk into the fire so I could pull her out of the ashes. We started to walk. Step, step, step. The sound of my cane tapping against the white runner was a rhythmic counterpoint to the music. Tap, step, tap, step. I looked ahead. The guests were standing, turning to watch us. I saw the faces of my business partners, my neighbors, the elite of Chicago society. They were smiling, dabbing their eyes. They saw a frail old man giving away his only daughter. They thought it was touching. They had no idea they were witnessing a crime scene. I looked at the front row. There she was. Patricia. She was dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, her shoulders shaking with what looked like overwhelming emotion. It was a masterclass in acting. To the audience, she was the weeping stepmother overcome with joy. To me, I knew she was crying because she was mentally counting the zeros on the check I had signed. She wasn't looking at Sarah. She was looking past us at the altar, ensuring the transaction was proceeding on schedule. Her tears were as counterfeit as the divorce papers she had given me 5 years ago. We moved closer. The altar loomed ahead. Tyler was standing there, the golden boy. He wore his white tuxedo with the easy arrogance of a man who believes he is untouchable. His hair was perfectly gelled, his teeth perfectly whitened. He watched Sarah approach not with love, but with hunger. It was the look a wolf gives a lamb before the first bite. He stood with his hands clasped in front of him, a pose of mock humility, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He was impatient. He wanted the vows over. He wanted the money. As we reached the halfway point, Sarah stumbled slightly. Her heel caught on the carpet. I caught her. I held her up. "Steady," I said. "I have got you." She looked at me, and for a second the brainwashing seemed to crack. She looked at me with confusion, as if she was suddenly remembering who I really was. Not the senile burden Patricia had painted, but her father. The man who had built her tree houses and checked under her bed for monsters. "Dad," she whispered. I squeezed her arm. "I love you, Sarah. Never forget that." We reached the end of the aisle. The music swelled to a crescendo and then faded into silence. The only sound was the rustle of fabric and the distant chirp of birds. Tyler stepped forward. He reached out his hand to take hers. This was the moment. The handoff. The transfer of ownership. I looked at Tyler's hand. It was manicured steady. It was the hand that had poured poison into my water. It was the hand that had caressed my wife in the pool house. I looked him in the eye. He winked at me. A tiny, imperceptible wink. A victory lap before the race was even finished. I took Sarah's hand from my arm. It felt cold and small. I placed it into Tyler's palm. The physical contact with him made my skin crawl. It felt like handing a diamond to a pig. "Take care of her, Tyler," I said, my voice loud enough for the first few rows to hear. "Oh, I will, Pops," he replied, flashing that $1,000,000 smile. "Like she is my own life." Liar. I stepped back. The ritual was complete. I had delivered the victim. I turned and walked to the empty seat next to Patricia. As I sat down, I felt the envelope in Frank Reynolds's pocket burning a hole in the atmosphere 2 rows behind me. I sat heavily, letting out a sigh that sounded like exhaustion, but was actually the release of the safety catch on a loaded weapon. Patricia leaned in her perfume, cloying and sweet. She grabbed my hand and squeezed it, her nails digging into my palm. "You did good, Gerald," she whispered, her voice low and venomous. "Now just sit there and shut up. Do not embarrass us. We are 10 minutes away from the champagne." I stared straight ahead at the preacher who was opening his leather-bound book. "I am not hungry for champagne, Patricia," I murmured, gripping the head of my cane. The preacher cleared his throat. The crowd went silent. The air was electric, heavy with the humidity and the weight of the impending lie. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, his voice booming over the speakers. "We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." I watched Sarah's back. Her shoulders were shaking. I watched Tyler's back. He was stiff, eager. I watched the clock ticking in my head. Tick, tock. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now we just waited for the snap. The Reverend's voice was a deep baritone that seemed to vibrate through the wooden floorboards of the stage. He spoke of love, of commitment, of 2 souls becoming one. Every word felt like a lie. I sat there gripping the head of my cane with both hands, my eyes fixed on the back of Tyler's neck. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot. Was it nerves, or was it the anticipation feed of the wire transfer that was scheduled to hit his offshore account the moment the marriage certificate was signed. I knew it was the latter. He was not nervous about the vows. He was impatient for the payout. Beside me, Patricia was a statue of maternal devotion. She held a lace handkerchief to her dry eyes, sniffing delicately at appropriate intervals. But I could feel the tension radiating off her. She was a coiled spring. She was watching the guests, watching the ushers, watching me. She knew we were in the final stretch. She thought she had sedated me into submission. She thought the check in her bra was her golden ticket. She had no idea that the ticket was void and the train was about to derail. If anyone here present knows of any just cause why these two may not be lawfully joined in marriage, the Reverend intoned, looking out over the sea of designer hats and expensive suits, speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the traditional pause, a moment of theatrical tension that usually ends with a collective sigh of relief. The birds chirped in the garden. A breeze rustled the silk ribbons on the aisle markers. No one moved. No one ever moves. But today the silence was broken by the scrape of wood against wood. I planted my cane firmly on the white runner. I pushed down with all the strength left in my 70-year-old arms. My legs, weakened by weeks of poison, screamed in protest, but my will was iron. I rose slowly like a monolith rising from the sea. Patricia gasped. It was a sharp intake of breath that sounded like a tear in fabric. She reached out, her fingers digging into my jacket sleeve, trying to anchor me to the bench. "Sit down," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper that only I could hear. "Sit down, Gerald. Do not make a scene. You are having an episode." I ignored her. I shook her hand off as if it were a dead leaf. I stood to my full height. I was not the hunched, confused old man anymore. I was Gerald Vance, the man who had reshaped the skyline of this city, and I was about to reshape my daughter's reality. "I object," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried. It cut through the humidity and the scent of roses like a blade. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers erupted like a sudden brushfire. Did he say he objects? Is he drunk? Is he sick? Sarah turned around slowly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with confusion and embarrassment. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing?" "Please sit down." Tyler spun around. His face was a mask of fury that he struggled to keep in place. He looked at Patricia, his eyes screaming, "Fix this!" Patricia launched herself out of her seat. She threw her arms around me, not in a hug, but in a restraint. She turned to the crowd, her face twisted into a mask of tragic concern. "Please, everyone, forgive him," she shouted, her voice shrill. "My husband is not well. He is confused. He forgot to take his medication this morning. He doesn't know where he is." She looked at the ushers, waving her hand frantically. "Get the doctor. Get him out of here. He is having a breakdown." She dug her nails into my ribs, whispering into my ear, "I am going to kill you for this old man. I am going to put you in a home so dark you will never see the sun again." I looked down at her. I saw the fear behind the rage. She knew. Somewhere deep down, she knew the ground was crumbling. "I am not confused, Patricia," I said, my voice booming now, fueled by a lifetime of authority. "And I am not the one who needs a doctor." I raised my cane and pointed it not at the altar, but above it. "Look at the screen," I commanded. Everyone turned. Behind the altar there was a massive LED wall intended to display a slideshow of Sarah and Tyler's childhood photos during the reception. It had been black until this moment. Suddenly, it flickered to life. Brandon had timed it perfectly. There was no static, no loading screen, just immediate high-definition clarity. The video that appeared was not a montage of happy memories. It was the footage from the pool house taken 3 days ago. The crowd gasped as one entity, a collective sound of horror that sucked the air out of the garden. On the screen, 20 feet high, was my wife, the elegant Patricia, pressed against the billiards table. And pressed against her, kissing her neck, with a familiarity that made stomachs turn, was the groom. Tyler. Oh my God, someone screamed in the back row. Sarah stood frozen. She did not blink. She did not breathe. She stared at the giant image of her fiancé and her stepmother, unable to process the visual information. It was too grotesque, too impossible. Patricia let go of me. She staggered back, her hand flying to her mouth. No, she whimpered. No, that is fake, that is AI. He made it up. But the video was just the appetizer. The audio kicked in. The sound system designed to carry the delicate notes of a string quartet now blasted the recording from the nightclub. It was the recording Brandon had captured just hours ago. The voice of Tyler filled the garden, loud, slurring, and undeniably him. She is not just some lady I met. She is family. Blood. The guests fell silent. The shock was so profound that even the wind seemed to stop blowing. She is my aunt. Tyler's voice continued echoing off the glass walls of the conservatory. My mother's sister. She raised me. We worked Miami together. Scams. Widows. I looked at Sarah. She was swaying. Her bouquet dropped from her hands, hitting the white carpet with a soft thud. The roses' scattered petals breaking off like shattered dreams. But Gerald. Gerald was the whale. The recording continued. When she landed him, she called me. She said, "Ty, get to Chicago. I found the retirement plan." Tyler stood at the altar looking small. The arrogance was gone. He looked like a child caught standing over a broken vase, except the vase was human lives. He looked at the screen, then at the crowd searching for an exit. So what is the split? The investigator's voice asked on the tape. 50-50. Tyler's voice sneered. Once the old man kicks the bucket, maybe Sarah has an accident. Who knows, tragedies run in the family. That was the breaking point. The horror in the garden transformed instantly into rage. I saw fathers clenching their fists. I saw mothers covering their children's ears. This was not just adultery. This was a confession of conspiracy to commit murder. This was a confession of premeditated predation. I turned to Patricia. She was trembling violently. Her face was gray. She looked at the screen, then at me. "You," she whispered. "You knew." I leaned in close, my voice cold as the grave. I knew everything, Patricia. I knew about the pills. I knew about the check. I knew about the divorce papers you forged. Her eyes went wide. That was the final blow. She realized I had found the one loose thread that unraveled her entire existence. Sarah turned slowly to look at Tyler. Her face was a mask of devastation, but her eyes were dry. The shock was too deep for tears. "You are her nephew," she whispered. The words sounded foreign in her mouth. Tyler took a step toward her, his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of surrender. "Sarah, baby, listen. It is not what it sounds like. It is out of context. The old man, he edited it. He is crazy, remember? Don't come near me," Sarah said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. She looked at Patricia. Patricia, who was currently trying to edge her way toward the side exit, her gold dress shimmering mockingly in the sun. "And you," Sarah said. Her voice broke. "You told me you loved me. You told me he was the problem." Sarah pointed at me. "You made me hate my own father," she screamed, the tears finally breaking through. "You made me hate the only person who actually gave a damn about me." Patricia stopped. She straightened her back. The mask fell away completely. There was no point in pretending anymore. Her face hardened into a sneer of pure contempt. "Oh, grow up, Sarah," Patricia spat. "You were an easy mark. You and your father. You are so desperate to be loved, you will believe anything." Do you think a 28-year-old personal trainer falls in love with a plain, boring girl like you? Do you think I fell in love with a wrinkly old workaholic? We did it for the money. And we earned every penny dealing with your pathetic emotional needs. The cruelty of her words hung in the air, sharper than any knife. The crowd gasped again. But I did not gasp. I smiled. Because she had just confessed in front of 300 witnesses. I looked at Frank Reynolds in the second row. He was standing up now. He buttoned his jacket. He pulled the envelope I had given him out of his pocket. "That is enough," Patricia, Frank said, his voice booming with authority. Patricia looked at him confused. "Frank, what are you doing? Arrest him. He illegally recorded us." Frank walked into the aisle. He was joined by 4 uniformed officers who had emerged from the back of the garden. "Patricia Miller," Frank said, walking toward her with handcuffs glinting in the sunlight. "Or should I say, Patricia Dante. You are under arrest for bigamy, fraud, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit murder." Patricia's face went white. "Bigamy? How did you—" Frank held up the envelope. "Your husband Silvio sent his regards, and so did the toxicologist who analyzed Gerald's blood." Tyler tried to run. He vaulted over the railing of the altar, heading for the bushes. But Brandon was there. My son stepped out of the shadows and tackled him with the force of a freight train. They went down in a tangle of limbs and white tuxedo fabric. I watched as the police hauled Tyler to his feet, blood trickling from his nose. I watched as they cuffed Patricia's hands behind her back. She was screaming now, cursing me, cursing Sarah, cursing the world. I walked over to Sarah. She was standing alone in the center of the chaos, looking lost. I dropped my cane. I didn't need it anymore. I walked to her and opened my arms. She looked at me, her lip trembling. "Dad." She collapsed into my chest. She sobbed a deep, guttural sound of heartbreak and relief. I held her tight. I held her like I used to hold her when she was a child and woke up from a nightmare. "It is over," I whispered into her hair. "The nightmare is over. You are safe." I looked over her shoulder at the screen, which was still playing the loop of their betrayal. "Turn it off," I commanded. The screen went black. The garden was silent again, save for the sound of my daughter crying and the click of handcuffs. I looked at the crowd. They were stunned, but I saw respect in their eyes. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the protector. I had burned the wedding to the ground, just like I promised. But from the ashes, my family was going to rise. "This is a fake. This is all a fake." Patricia's voice shredded the silence of the garden, rising to a screech that made the guests flinch. She was frantic now, a trapped animal snapping its jaws at the bars of the cage. She pointed a trembling finger at the blank screen, then at me, her eyes wild with a mixture of terror and fury. "Do not believe him," she yelled, turning to the stunned crowd, desperate to find a single sympathetic face. "My husband has dementia. He is paranoid. He used artificial intelligence to make those videos." "That is not me. That is not Tyler. It is a deepfake." She grabbed the lapels of a judge sitting in the front row, a man who had dined at our house a dozen times. "Judge Miller, tell them this is illegal. He cannot do this. He is ruining my daughter's wedding." The judge gently but firmly removed her hands from his suit. He did not look at her. He looked at me, and then he looked at the police officers standing in the aisle. He knew. Everyone knew. The desperation in her voice was not the sound of an innocent woman defending her honor. It was the sound of a guilty woman realizing the walls were closing in. "It is not a deepfake, Patricia," I said, my voice calm, cutting through her hysteria like a scalpel. "And it is not the only thing you faked." Frank Reynolds stepped forward. He was no longer just my poker buddy. He was the chief of police, and his presence filled the space between the altar and the pews. He held the thick envelope I had given him, now opened. "Patricia Miller," Frank said, his voice flat and professional. We are not just here about the video. We are here about Nevada. Patricia froze. The blood drained from her face so completely that her foundation stood out like a yellow mask. She stopped screaming. She stopped moving. The word Nevada hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "I do not know what you are talking about," she whispered, backing away until she bumped into the altar railing. Frank pulled a document from the envelope. He held it up. "This is a marriage certificate from Las Vegas, dated 2003," Frank read, "between Patricia Ann Miller and Silvio Dante." He pulled out another paper. "And this is an affidavit from the Clark County Clerk's office dated yesterday. It states that there is no record of divorce between these two parties. The divorce decree you presented to Gerald Vance 5 years ago was a forgery. The signature belongs to a judge who had been dead for 2 years before you supposedly signed it." The crowd gasped again. This was not just scandal. This was a crime. "That means," Frank continued, taking a step closer to her, "that your marriage to Gerald Vance is void. It never legally existed. You are not his wife. You are a bigamist. And as of this moment, you have absolutely no claim to his estate, his assets, or his medical proxy." Patricia shook her head, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. No, that is a lie. Silvio is gone. He disappeared. He is right here," a gravelly voice spoke from the shadows. Silvio Dante stepped out from behind the large floral arrangement at the back of the altar. He looked older than his photos, worn down by hard years and cheap liquor, but his eyes were clear. He wore a cheap suit that Brandon had bought him, but he wore it with dignity. He walked past me and stood in front of Patricia. "Hello, Patty," Silvio said. Patricia let out a strangled sound, a whimper that was half sob, half scream. She looked at Silvio as if he were a corpse risen from the grave. "You," she hissed. "You were supposed to stay in the hole I left you in." "I climbed out," Silvio said simply. "And I brought a ladder." Frank signaled to his officers. 2 of them moved in on Patricia. 2 others hauled Tyler up from the grass where Brandon had pinned him. Tyler was bleeding from a cut on his lip. His white tuxedo was stained with grass and dirt. He looked at the police, then at Patricia. The look of conspiracy was gone. In its place was the panicked self-preservation of a rat on a sinking ship. "She made me do it," Tyler shouted, struggling against the officer's grip. "I didn't want to. She told me she would cut me out if I didn't seduce the girl. It was her plan, the pills, the forged papers, everything. I am just the nephew. I just did what she said." "You spineless little worm," Patricia screamed, lunging at him, her fingernails hooked like claws. "Shut your mouth!" The officers grabbed her arms. They pulled them behind her back. Patricia fought. She kicked. She screamed obscenities that would make a sailor blush, but the steel cuffs clicked shut around her wrists. The sound was sharp, final, and infinitely satisfying. Patricia Dante Frank recited, "You are under arrest for bigamy, fraud, grand larceny, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it," I added, watching her struggle. Tyler was cuffed next. He was sobbing now, begging Sarah to look at him, begging me to tell them it was a misunderstanding. "Dad. Sarah. Please, I love her. I really do." Sarah turned her back on him. She did not say a word. Her silence was louder than his screams. As the police began to drag them away, Patricia dug her heels into the white carpet. She twisted her head to look at me one last time. Her face was contorted with hate stripped of all its beauty. "You old fool," she shrieked. "You think you won? You will be dead in a year. You are alone, you have nothing." I walked over to her. I leaned on my cane, not because I needed it, but because I liked the look of authority it gave me. I looked her in the eye. "I have my children, Patricia," I said calmly. "I have my dignity, and I have my house. You have a cellmate and a court date. Take them away," Frank ordered. The guests watched in stunned silence as the bride's stepmother and the groom were marched down the aisle not to the sound of applause but to the sound of their own frantic pleas. The white runner meant for a procession of love became the path of their shame. I watched them go until they disappeared into the back of the police cruisers waiting at the gates. The flashing blue lights reflected off the white roses, turning them a ghostly shade of azure. I turned back to the altar. The screen was black. The music had stopped. The garden was quiet. Silvio walked up to me. He extended a rough, calloused hand. "She is your problem now, Mr. Vance," Silvio said. "Or rather, the state's problem." "Thank you, Silvio," I said, shaking his hand. "You gave me my life back." I turned to the crowd. They were still sitting there, unsure of what to do. Was the wedding over? Was there a reception? I raised my hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice steady. "There will be no wedding today. However, the food is paid for, the champagne is chilled, and the music is booked. I invite you all to stay, not to celebrate a marriage, but to celebrate the truth, and to celebrate the fact that my daughter is safe." A murmur went through the crowd. Then slowly, someone started to clap, then another. Soon the entire garden was applauding. It wasn't the polite applause of a wedding. It was the applause of relief, of support, of justice witnessed. I walked over to Sarah. She was sitting on the steps of the altar, her face buried in her hands. Brandon was sitting next to her, his arm around her shoulders. I sat down on her other side. "It is okay to cry," I said softly. Sarah looked up. Her mascara was running, her face was blotchy. "I feel so stupid, Dad," she whispered. "I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it." "You saw what they wanted you to see," Brandon said gently. "They were professionals, Sarah. They fooled Dad for 5 years. They fooled the bank. They fooled everyone." I took her hand. The ring Tyler had given her, probably paid for with money stolen from my accounts, glittered on her finger. "Take it off," I said. Sarah looked at the ring. She pulled it off slowly. She looked at it for a moment, then threw it into the bushes. "I am sorry, Dad," she choked out. "I said terrible things to you. I told you to die alone." I pulled her into a hug, squeezing her tight. "You were protecting the father you thought I was," I said. "And now I am going to be the father you deserve." I looked at Brandon. He smiled. It was the first time I had seen him smile in 3 years. "We did it, Dad," he said. "We did it," I agreed. The police cars drove away, their sirens wailing in the distance. The sound faded, replaced by the gentle rustle of the wind in the trees. The nightmare was over. The fever had broken. And as I sat there with my 2 children, flanked by the ruins of a wedding that never happened, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I was Gerald Vance. I was 70 years old. I was a widower. But for the first time in a long time, I was free. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the ceremony finally began to ebb away, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. The police cruisers had vanished down the long driveway, taking the toxicity of my life with them, but the wreckage remained. The botanical garden minutes ago, a scene of perfect curated beauty, now felt like a crime scene. Guests lingered in small, shocked clusters, whispering behind their hands, their eyes darting toward the altar, where a wedding had just mutated into a felony arrest. But I did not care about them. My entire world was focused on the young woman sitting on the white runner, surrounded by the scattered petals of white roses that had been trampled in the chaos. Sarah had stopped sobbing. Now she was just shaking, a continuous, violent tremor that rattled her entire frame. Her designer gown, the one that cost more than a car, was stained with grass and dirt, spreading out around her like a wilted flower. She stared at the empty space where Tyler had stood, her eyes wide and vacant, as if she were trying to reconcile the image of the man she loved with the monster who had just been dragged away in handcuffs. I sat down on the grass beside her. I did not care about my tuxedo. I did not care about my dignity or my aching joints. I reached out and wrapped my arm around her shoulders. She felt fragile like a bird that had flown into a glass window. She leaned into me, her head resting heavily on my chest, and I could feel her tears soaking through my shirt, hot and fast. Brandon stood in front of us, his back to the family, facing the crowd. He was a wall of muscle and resolve. I saw a few guests raising their phones trying to capture a photo of the disgraced bride trying to steal a piece of our tragedy for their social media feeds. Brandon stepped forward, his hand raised, his expression dark and dangerous. "Put the phones away," he commanded, his voice low but carrying the threat of immediate violence. "This is not a show. Go home. Now." The guests, shamed by his intensity, began to scatter, retreating toward the parking lot, like leaves blown by a sudden wind. Brandon remained there, a sentinel guarding our vulnerability, ensuring that in this moment of absolute brokenness we were untouchable. Sarah drew a shuddering breath, pulling away slightly to look at me. Her face was streaked with mascara, her eyes red and swollen. The anger she had directed at me the night before was gone, replaced by a profound, hollow confusion. "Dad," she croaked, her voice raw. You knew about the pills. You knew about the fraud. You knew he was her nephew." I nodded slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I knew." Then why, she asked, and the pain in her voice cracked my heart open. "Why did you let it go this far? Why did you let me put on the dress? Why did you let me walk down the aisle? You could have told me yesterday. You could have saved me from this humiliation. Why did you let me stand there like a fool while everyone watched?" She hit my chest weakly with her fist, a gesture of frustration and heartbreak. I caught her hand and held it tight. I looked deep into her eyes, needing her to understand the hardest decision I had ever made. "Because if I had told you yesterday, you would not have believed me," I said softly. "You were in love with a mirage, Sarah. If I had simply told you the truth, Patricia would have spun it. She would have told you I was jealous, that I was lying, that I was trying to control you. You would have married him anyway, just to prove me wrong. And then 6 months from now, when the money was gone and I was dead, you would have been alone with them." I paused, wiping a fresh tear from her cheek with my thumb. "It was like a surgery, sweetheart. To save the patient, sometimes you have to cut deep. You have to expose the infection to the light before you can remove it. I had to let you see their faces when the mask slipped. I had to let you hear their voices when they thought no one was listening." Sarah looked down at her hands, the truth settling over her like a heavy blanket. "I let it happen this way because I had a choice," I whispered, pulling her close again. "I could let you feel a sharp, terrible pain for 1 hour today, or I could let you die slowly, in a life of lies, for the next 20 years. I chose the pain, Sarah, because I knew you were strong enough to survive the pain. But I knew you would not survive the lie." Sarah closed her eyes, and a fresh wave of tears came, but these were different. These were the tears of healing. She buried her face in my neck, holding on to me as if I were the only solid thing in a world that had turned to liquid. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice muffled against my jacket. "Thank you for saving me." I held my daughter under the open sky, watching the clouds drift by, knowing the storm had finally passed. The rain had washed away the filth, and though the garden was ruined, the roots remained. And roots, I knew, were the only things that mattered. It has been 6 months since the sirens faded from the garden, and the silence they left behind has finally been filled with something new. Laughter. Real, unforced laughter. I am sitting at the head of the dining table, the same table where I once pretended to have tremors to save my fortune. But tonight, my hands are steady as I carve the roast. The heavy velvet curtains Patricia insisted on are gone, replaced by sheer linen that lets the evening light flood the room. The house no longer smells of her cloying lavender perfume and secrets. It smells of rosemary, garlic, and peace. To my right, Sarah is telling a story about her new job at the nonprofit foundation. She is single now, and she is healing. There are days when I see the shadow of the trauma in her eyes, but she is no longer the fragile doll Patricia molded. She is stronger. She is building herself back up brick by brick, and this time she is the architect of her own life. To my left, Brandon is pouring wine. He did not go back to being a ghost. He stayed. We are partners now, not just in business, but in the business of being a family. We spent years estranged because of a lie, and we are making up for lost time with every shared meal. I look at the empty chair where Patricia used to sit. For a long time I feared being alone. I feared the quiet of this big house. But looking at my children now, I realize I was never truly alone. I was just isolated by a predator who wanted to keep me weak. People have asked me if I regret the spectacle. They ask if it was necessary to humiliate them so publicly, to destroy the wedding so violently. And every time I give them the same answer. Yes, it was necessary. Because true love is not just about kindness and support. Sometimes true love is about being the villain in the story to save the people you care about. I had to be ruthless to protect the innocent. I had to be cold to preserve the warmth of this family. I am Gerald Vance. I spent my life building skyscrapers that touched the clouds, believing they were my legacy. I was wrong. My legacy is sitting right here at this table. It is the safety of my daughter and the loyalty of my son. And as I raise my glass to toast them, I know one thing for certain. It is never too late to fight for what is yours. It is never too late to wake up. And it is never too late to start living. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to make a hard choice to save someone you love. Until next time, remember that the truth always finds a way to the surface.